Hi there. Welcome back to the Reel Film Chronicles. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's exciting episode, we're going to be talking about a little film called Scream.
Scream 2022. The fifth entry in the Scream series. And first, right off the bat, I just want to say it's kind of odd, but they didn't give it more of a title. Because it's just called Scream. The very first movie in the series was called Scream. Why not just go with Scream 5, right?
Or 5 Scream, like the 5 instead of the S. 5 cream, Scream.
5. And it's funny because, like, you talk about horror franchises, like, a lot of them will kind of stick with the numbers, but they'll always have, like, subtitles. But Scream really has never done that. Scream 1, 2, 3, 4. Very simple, to the point. I've always liked that. And so now we have a requel, and it's not, I mean, it's a sequel, it's a reboot, and they themselves in the movie call it a requel. But this is Scream 2022, based on the, I think they even reference of themselves. They're like the meta slasher whodunit film series. That kind of, back in the 90s, I mean, the first Scream movie came out in 1996, really revitalized the horror movie in the industry and theaters. Like, this kind of set the bar for a lot of horror films for quite a while afterwards.
By one of the masters himself, the late, great Wes Craven.
Wes Craven, yeah. And I want to also mention the writer, Kevin Williamson, I think being a big influence on that, of those two working together.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the original Scream.
Yes.
Right now, not Scream 2022, Scream 1996.
That's right. That's right, yeah. And I think, like, those two guys were able to work together and create some really, like, they create some really good series of films, basically. Yeah,
I mean, the title kind of, I know that they make fun of it themselves in the movie, to kind of give themselves permission to do it. It still doesn't make me like it. I don't like that they did it with Halloween either. I think it's kind of stupid and confusing. It's like, oh yeah, the sequel to Halloween is called Halloween. The sequel to Scream is called Scream. It's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Like, no matter how you can make fun of it and be aware of it, but it's still stupid. I'm going to say it. It's a stupid way to name your movies. Call it Halloween. Like, the first reboot of Halloween should have had some subtitle with it. And this Scream, like, give it a subtitle, give it a number. But, like, it's so confusing even to talk about online, or to talk about with people. Have you seen Scream? It's like, yeah, I've seen Scream. No, not that Scream. The other Scream. It's like,
yeah,
guys, like, it's one thing if there's two movies that happen to be named the same thing, which happens every once in a while. Like Frozen, for example. You look up Frozen, there's two very, very different movies with that title.
Yeah, sure.
But, like,
I kind of feel like with Scream, you have this opportunity where, I mean, 25 years have passed since the initial
25.
Scream, right? And it's like you're basically making a movie for a lot of people who potentially have never seen the original Scream series. And the movie can stand on its own, and it has enough in it to really, like, make a comprehensive, like a comprehensive story, where those other ones, like Halloween, that is a great example where, can you watch I think it was maybe 2018, that requel came out, and it was a sequel to the first Halloween from, the 70s. Like, that one, 40 years have passed. But did they do a good enough job in that movie to, like, make it so that the original one was not
that one
required
made even less sense, because, like, the new Halloween was a direct sequel to the first Halloween. There was nothing, like, it was ignoring every other movie in that franchise. It was like Halloween and then the sequel Halloween. It was like you guys must be, I don't know what you're smoking, but I want to know where I can get some. Like,
well, you know what? I'm sure you could write, like, quite the master's thesis on the Halloween franchise, because there's so much of that going on where like there's been reboots of it, and they will ignore certain movies, and then there'll be another restart of the film series, and they'll incorporate elements from other parts. And
online somebody had broken it down. There's actually 3 or 4 completely separate timelines that you have to follow through the Halloween movie. So it's almost like it was like a multiverse before there was a multiverse, because, like, the Halloween was at H2O and everything, ignored those bunch of movies. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Scream, at least Scream, the naming is stupid, but it makes sense in the chronology of the film. It's great because like there's no retconning, half of the films out of existence in this continuity or anything.
Yeah,
it continues on through all the previous 4 movies. So in that sense, it's a little bit easier to it's a little bit of an easier pill to swallow, I should say.
Now, I do believe there's another Scream movie coming, and I'm not sure. You're going into danger territory if they call that Scream 2 or something, right? Then you have, like, I understand, but maybe they'll take a different approach. But definitely one of the nice things about the Scream movies is exactly as you said, like there has been some decent continuity in the storyline and a lot of respect for real time passing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those series that I had only ever seen the original Scream. I hadn't seen any of the sequels until 2 nights ago when I started my Halloween movie marathon. In the course of 48 hours, I watched all 5 Scream movies.
That is truly a killer feat.
I started off with a bang. But yeah, I was surprised how like there's always like a bit of retconning as the series goes along to find kind of fresh ways to kind of revitalize the narrative a little bit. But even some of the retconning is like they didn't have to stretch things too far in terms of like I don't know if I'm spoiling anything for some of those older movies. I think the last one before this one came out in 2011.
Yes,
so we'll call it fair game. But there was like backstory with Sydney's mother having had another child with another. So she had a half brother who was the villain in Scream 3, I believe, when they're making Stab 3, which Stab is like the in-universe movie version of events that happened in the Scream movies. So it's like
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. They go like super meta. Like if you like meta, we got some meta with your meta. Pretty amazing. And I thought watching these movies that the whole meta, that idea of the movie being a slasher flick in its own right, but while breaking down the tropes and kind of critiquing the tropes of the slasher movie, I thought that would get old for me, but somehow it kind of worked through all the movies. And the whole, they kind of give themselves a free pass, and it works, I'm going to say, for the most part, of being like, oh, we're kind of making fun of these dumb horror movie tropes, so it's okay to have them in. And I was like, there's a fine line to walk when doing that. And I think, surprisingly, I was really surprised how well, for the most part, the series was able to balance on that kind of razor's edge. Fell down a few places a couple times, but overall, I was like, I was really surprised how much I enjoyed the Scream movies.
Well, I think it's a testament to especially Wes Craven in navigating that razor's edge of the meta commentary and making a very compelling slasher film as well at the same time, and being able to maintain that. And now we're in 2022, and I mean, we don't have the creative mind of Wes Craven anymore to guide us. And I think I'm watching Scream, like number 5 here, the latest one, and I'm thinking they worked really hard to keep that spirit alive. And I think they paid a lot of respect to the original films, and I think they pay a lot of respect to the way he would have approached this film, and like 20 plus years since the first movie came out.
One of the things that really makes these movies work is that you can tell they were made by people who really love horror movies. Yeah, it's really neat to go through all the Scream sequels and to see they're constantly referencing horror movies, and some of them they're referencing like classic horror movies, but they're always referencing new and emerging horror movies. And it's almost like Wes Craven's way of like highlighting, oh, like here's what modern horror movie makers are doing. It's like his homage to his peers. That's a really kind of classy kind of approach to filmmaking, where he's like, he loves horror, he loves old horror, and he's loving the new horror that comes out. And so for me, that's what made a lot of the movies work too, is that Scream is a horror series that's made by and for horror fans kind of unapologetically. So the poking fun at all these tropes kind of works because like you're being included on the joke, right? And it's pretty, and the new movie, I will say, did a pretty good job of that and carrying on Wes Craven's legacy and carrying it, and like that love of, all these horror movies they were listing off. I love like in the opening scene there, when the young Jane the Virgin there, was it Jenny Ortega? Is that her name?
Yes.
And she's listing off her favorite horror movies, and it's like, it's the Babadook. She says is her favorite, and then she's listing off like Hereditary, and all these other newer movies. Like, oh, that's awesome that they're continuing that tradition of paying homage to, the current, pantheon of horror movies, and it's a great tradition to carry on.
Yeah, and it's like the original Scream came out in a time where horror movies were sort of at a low point in cinemas, especially slashers had like just devolved into essentially garbage.
By that point, where was the Elm Street and Friday the 13th genre? Like there were low points in those series around that time, I think, right?
No, definitely, yeah. And now, I mean, even at the end of Scream, so Scream 96, Scream 2 97, Scream 3 in 2000. And then the horror movie like world kind of moved on from slashers and even like the meta commentary in their films, and they moved into a lot of different paranoia, the torture, gore stuff, and they really, I mean, horror saw like a new renaissance, and again in the past few years, another renaissance in the quote unquote elevated horror era, with the aforementioned Hereditary and Babadook. That has all these extra layers of meaning on top of their like
follows,
really suspenseful.
Yeah,
It Follows. There's so many drop titles in there that you're gonna recognize because these movies were big, and then to release a Scream in that climate of all these new movies, these new horror movies, and these movies aren't like dead and gone or anything. Scream is not coming back to revitalize horror movies. It has to find space between all those movies to be relevant and catch your attention, in addition to being a compelling horror movie and a slasher horror movie at that, which we don't really get a lot of anymore, because it's a lot of these more like almost horror dramas that are out there now, like this elevated horror stuff amongst all the Conjuring world of paranormal activities and all the supernatural stuff happening there, which I have a comment on that later too. But I thought, like, overall, like it really sliced itself in there quite nicely.
Yeah, no, it's funny because like lately I've been like, like all the Ari Aster stuff they mentioned, like Hereditary and Midsummer and stuff, and like obviously the Babadook, It Follows, like The Endless and all that kind of stuff, and like the new kind of horror movies, Conjuring, like all the James Waniverse, or his multiple James Wan universes, right? There's Conjuring, there's Sinister? Is that his as well?
I'm not sure on Sinister, but Sinister only had 2 films,
or Insidious, I think, maybe.
Insidious, yeah.
Insidious, yeah. Yeah, so like the slasher is kind of, it almost feels like an antiquated genre now, and like I didn't really realize that until like watching these movies. Like, oh yeah, like really, like Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. I was like, oh yeah, like you don't really see, aside from the attempted remakes of those franchises, or like My Bloody Valentine, or a bunch of stuff. Like I love in number 4 when Hayden Panettiere's character Kirby is being asked a question about like, oh, what famous horror movie was rebooted, and she goes off on this tirade listing off like 20 or 30 different movies, and it's like makes you think, it's like, oh my goodness, yeah, all those old slashers, people have been trying to recapture that magic and remaking them. But there is something, even though a lot of the entries I find, let's just say that there was a wide range of quality in some of those older, or old school maybe, horror franchises like Halloween and Friday the 13th. There's still something endearing about those movies that keeps me coming back and watching them.
Yeah.
And I think there's space for both like the elevated horror that's talking about making, it's like horror combined with real world, like social commentary. But I think there's also a space for just a good old fashioned murder spree of a maniac going around and killing people with a knife. I think if you do either one of those correctly, you can end up with a great crowd-pleasing movie, right?
Yeah, and what really works for me in Scream is the whodunit nature. You have it's clown face, right?
Ghost face. Come
Ghost
on.
face, sorry, clown face. What am I thinking?
Clown face.
Clown face.
Like killer clowns from outer space or something? What? Come on.
Oh, So you have Ghostface running around, stabbing people, and you get your kill count up. But then you have the whodunit nature, and there's all the red herrings and all, like, the movie is making you work to think. You figured it out in the first few minutes, and you're like, no, we got to make you question yourself. And Wes Craven was really good at that, and I think this new movie does a pretty good job of that. And I think it's pretty early on, and just a heads up, I mean, spoilers for the movie.
Spoiler plenty.
Of course, but it's like these new teenagers basically come to Dewey for help. And he kind of figures it out almost right away, right? Like, he's just like, yeah, it's this new boyfriend. You've only known him 6 months, and it's just like, this is how the rules work for all these things, and it's got to be this guy. And he calls it, but he's telling the audience that you, the viewer, would be like, oh, he's at the top of the suspect list now. And the movie has to work all that extra harder to get you to think it's not actually him. It could be somebody else doing it. And of course, I mean, there's going to be a couple of murders. Even when I was rewatching this movie, it was halfway through. I was like, were there 2 or 3 killers in this one? Because there's always been a couple of them, right? And I was like, oh, maybe they're going to try and flip that one on its head a little bit and just have 3 killers instead. But they stuck with the 2, and it was quite effective. I really liked the killers' motivations too. How did you feel about that throughout the series?
Yeah, the killers' motivations, like, it's weird because, like, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, I get it, but, like, there's always that it's very formulaic and, like, probably in the best possible way, where you come to expect these things and then have your expectations subverted. But there's always that reveal of, like, oh, who the killers actually were, and then they explain their whole plot to Sydney, Neve Campbell. For some reason, she has this magical power of, like, being able to break down the bad guys' defenses, where they just tell her their whole evil plots. And I like the motivations, but, like, the writing, like, their motivations in each movie are just, like, spelled out so explicitly, and the dialogue is so on the nose. It's like, there keeps in those reveal scenes, they could stand to be maybe a little. I know, like, this is a weird thing to say in a over the top slasher flick, but maybe a bit more subtlety in the writing and how they express those emotions. Because, like, having the villains in this case be the extreme toxic fans and have toxic fandom taken to its extreme conclusion, which I thought was a really timely, really brilliant thing to do. But some of the dialogue was a little bit cringy and on the nose, a little bit. But that's also par for the course for the rest of the movies as well. So I can't really fault it for that. But I thought it was like that whole reveal at the end about the 2. Like, the one girl there, I can't remember her name now. She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where she also got set on fire and killed.
Oh,
she was
so
one of
probably
the
on purpose in this film.
She was one of the Well, it can't not, like, with a film this self-aware and a series this self-aware. There's so many references, not just to the horror films and the other Scream films themselves, but to other movies beyond that as well. But when they're talking about how they're fans of the original Stab movies, and that Stab got remade in universe by the guy who directed Knives Out. So it's like a real world parallel being drawn to the terrible backlash, sometimes racist and sexist backlash to people involved in The Last Jedi, which was for some reason a very divisive film. But yeah, having it taken to its logical conclusion and talking about the toxic fan cultures which kind of permeate online dialogue now. I mean, these are writers who actually they put some thought into what they were talking about here, which is like a nice change of pace from some other attempted slashers or attempted horror movies recently.
Well, that's what was really significant about it. This was probably my main point that I had written down about this movie, is that it's not just a commentary on horror movies anymore. It's a commentary on other films like the Star Wars specifically. And I think there is some YouTube
fandoms,
video.
I think, right?
Yes, the fandoms, yes. There was some good YouTube video essays that really delve into it. They mention, I mean, specifically Rian Johnson is called out in the movie as the guy who did Knives Out, which was the 8th Stab movie. And of course, the 8th movie in the Star Wars is The Last Jedi, and how there's all this toxic fan backlash against it. But they also mentioned that a lot of the scenes are kind of shot in that same way. And like Dewey's death is almost shot in a very similar manner as Han Solo being killed in the Star Wars films.
Obvious parallels there, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like they have to tread carefully to make it like the commentary death on it, but also make it significant because Dewey is a long-time character. You got to give this character some respect at his death and make sure it's not just for like a bit of an in joke on
the lols.
Commentary. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I think in this movie they did a really good job on that. The other element of the movie that I liked was how they brought back the characters, like the old characters, and like I'm referring
legacy
to Neve
characters. Hey,
legacy characters. Yes, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette are like the trinity of screen characters who are always showing up.
Sydney. Oh, what's the last name? Sydney. It starts with a P.
Prescott.
Sydney Prescott, Gail Weathers, and Dewey Decimal
Riley.
System. Dewey Riley.
Yeah.
Respectively. I was like, what struck me was most horror franchises, it's like the bad guy stays the same and he's terrorizing different groups of people every time.
Yeah.
But like in a subversion, like at a fundamental narrative level, the Scream series is a subversion of that structure where it's like it's the three main characters that survive and it's a different bad guy every time who's attacking them.
Yeah. I like that. Ghostface is a different person and people every single movie.
Yeah. But
It's
you
really
were saying
effective.
about like Dewey being this longtime character and like all these characters, like especially watching these back to back to back, is like you grow, like you're on this journey with them and seeing like kind of the ups and downs and highs and lows. And Dewey was such like, in a horror movie, he was such a lovable, likable guy. He seemed like kind of a doofus, but he was also like, he was also kicking
He
some
put his
butt.
heart into it, right? Yeah.
He was also like, he would jump head for, like if there was danger, he would be the first one on the line. So like, it's a really neat character. It's kind of sad to see him kind of broken and alone living in a trailer, but there was still some of that spark of the old Dewey left.
Oh yeah, like when he knew, like he was down to business, and it was also kind of, I don't know if it was ironic or not, but like he knows the rules of horror movies. He's lived through it, and the rules basically got him killed in this one because he's in the elevator. He's ready to go. He's like, no, you always have to go shoot them in the head because they're going to come back. And that's exactly what happens. He goes back in to finish them off, and the Ghostface overpowers him and ends up killing him, which is really sad. But it was a really effective scene, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I think this movie was a it was obviously trying to pass the torch to next generation to take over these movies. I haven't seen anything. I haven't been reading anything on the production of number 6 yet. But I don't know if Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox are involved at all.
So, yeah, well, that is a significant thing because Neve Campbell is not involved in the Scream 6 because she felt that she was not being given enough representation financially and probably in the role itself.
Yeah.
That other characters probably, like, she adds so much value to the series, and her value is not being
Well, her and Courtney Cox and David Arquette, they were the series, right? Like,
yeah. So she's basically officially said like she's not getting the value respected to come back. So she's bowing out of it. I think Courtney Cox is coming back. Hayden Panettiere from Scream 4 is coming back as well.
Yeah, I
and
heard
a
that.
whole host of the actors in this film, which I can't remember the names of any of them, but a lot of them are coming back as well. So it, like you said, it is going to be a passing of the torch, and I think
I was really happy to see Kirby, aka Hayden Panettiere, is back. Cause like at the end of number 4 is like they didn't show her that she was dead, so I was like, oh, she could still be alive.
Yeah,
I was like,
that's
all right.
that's the
And then
thing.
she is. And apparently there was an Easter egg in this one. I missed it. I guess when who's the dude from The Boys there? Huey from The Boys.
I want to say
Jack Quaid or something.
Yes, that's right.
And he's watching a YouTube video, and apparently there's like interview with Survivor, and it's like a picture of Hayden Panettiere there. It was like there was a clue that she was alive, and I was like, oh yeah, that's sweet.
Interesting.
That's pretty cool. And so many people come back, even like the sheriff in this one. She was the deputy from number 4.
Brutal daytime killing scene there.
That was kind of, it was kind of crazy. Whereas like it kind of showed the brazenness of this Ghostface. It was like they, because it's both a he and a she. There's a man and a woman this time, which I don't think we've seen since number 2. I think was the last time we saw that man and woman pair up to be the Ghostface. But just brazen. daytime killing in the middle of, on the
Right.
front porch, on the front yard of their house. And it was doubly brutal because like the killer, like Ghostface, kills the mom and then goes inside and kills the son. It's like just
Yeah,
decimates this entire family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the slowest police response ever, because she calls in backup before.
Oh, she does. She's on the way to the house, and she's like, "Get units there right away," and nobody shows up.
There were some timing issues a couple times where like that, and then one time when they were driving to the hospital, I think, or driving to, at one point it was like it was daytime, clearly like daytime, like high noon when they left, and they're just driving across town to the hospital, and it's nighttime suddenly in one cut. It was like a couple jarring things like that.
And I think they're driving to the hospital because they're asking the police after that murder who's there watching my sister, like who's guarding her. And the guy basically just looks off and just is like, oh nuts, this police force is a little inept. They don't got it.
It's also a small town police force, and they only have so many people, I guess. So like when you say like you get all units converge on my house, you don't have time to come back. It's like, do you really mean all units or only all the units minus the hospital? It's like you hear all units, like you go. They're not trained for this kind of eventuality. Although in Westboro, they bloody well should be trained.
You would think there's some training for all these killers.
Like you would have thought by this point, Westboro would have had they would have like a dedicated SWAT team just ready to go after all the stuff that's happened there.
Well, were all the movies, like I know one of them, maybe the second one was in college. Was that in Westboro as well?
No, the second one wasn't.
And I think the third one was kind of in Los Angeles or something. I could be misremembering. It's been a few years.
They were. Third one was in L.A. and the fourth one was back in Woodsboro again because it turned out, spoilers, it was her cousin was one of the killers in that one, which was kind of it was kind of, I don't know.
Well, the third one,
wacky reasoning.
The third one, I mean, I did write a couple notes on that because it's universally regarded as the worst one in the Scream series, that it kind of killed the series at some point, right?
I'm actually in line with critical consensus. Okay.
Yeah. And I think there were some interesting things there where Scream 3 was being created right in the wake of Columbine, the school shooting in 99, right? And so the studio basically came in and was like, we got to tone down the violence. We don't want all the gore. We don't want all the stuff. And I think Wes Craven was pushing back. And I think Kevin Williamson might have dropped out of writing it, like writing the screenplay for it. And they brought in different writers, and they sort of did not have the same respect for his original outlines as him being able to do it himself.
To be clear though, like even though 3 was the worst in the series, like it still wasn't terrible by any means. I don't think. For me, like I was really like, I don't want to emphasize how surprised I was at how much I enjoyed this series after having been disappointed so many times before by varying quality in movie series, having like usually maybe 2 or 3 really good entries, a couple mediocre ones, and then some like really bottom out ones. And the series never really seemed to bottom out yet. Fingers crossed. It's
like you said, like a lot of these horror franchises, these series, like they are touch and go. Like over the past decade, I've gone through a lot of them, like the Halloween, the Friday the 13th, and it's like you're out of like 8 or 10 movies, you're kind of struggling to find the gems, and like number 6 might be good in this regard. Number 4 is good if you look at it in this context, but
don't get me wrong. Like Friday the 13th is an example. I only really like, a couple of those movies, but I'll go back and watch. They're all fun to watch still, even though some of them I think like as far in terms of like filmmaking, is like these are objectively pretty terrible, but they're still fun to watch. So I want to kind of make that differentiation, whereas like, I'm criticizing the quality of these movies, but like on the one hand, from a filmmaking and like writing perspective and all the classical things we think of filmmaking, but there's still something. I mean, I think you have the Friday the 13th, that hardcore Scream Factory box set. It's like, I'm not even a huge fan. I'm not the biggest fan. It was like, I really want that box because I know I'm going to go back and revisit those movies again.
That's exactly it.
So it's this weird relationship, but like, in terms of like, just like from a filmmaking quality perspective, like the Scream films were never really, they haven't had that huge dip yet. It was like, I was kind of hoping after watching, I hadn't been reading a whole lot on the series. I was kind of hoping like 5 would kind of wrap it up, but they're going to keep pushing that envelope, keep pushing
Oh,
my
yeah.
luck here. It's like, I don't know how long can that hold up though, right? Like,
It all comes down to the dollars, and that's basically why
Yep.
we didn't get Scream 5 immediately after Scream 4. They took a little bit of a break there because the box office just wasn't as big as they were hoping for.
oh really? Because I thought like watching that movie, like it felt like a step up again from Scream 3. I don't know what the critical reception was at the time.
Well, we can run through it right now. I have the nice little table here. The first Scream had a budget of $14 million and
Nice.
made $173 million at the box office. Rotten Tomatoes puts that at about 79% of critics were favorable for that film. Scream 2 upped the budget to $24 million, and it brought in basically the exact same box office. And the Rotten Tomatoes score is actually higher at 81% for Scream 2. And maybe it's from that stacked cast. I remember when you were watching that, you sent me a text message about how stacked the cast is. And if you look at the cast listing in Scream 2, everyone came out for that film. It is wild. And a lot of actors who were quite small at the time, back in the late 90s, and quite big now, are in these movies. Just little tiny roles here and there. It's great.
It was crazy. It was like the horror equivalent of like Avengers Endgame or something, right? It was like, like everybody in Hollywood just showed up for this movie. It was like, I was kind of blown away. Yeah.
So then we have Scream 3, which upped the budget again to $40 million and brought in 162 box office, which isn't too bad. But after that, they kind of took a break. Scream 4 came out 11 years later, again with a budget of $40 million, and this time brought in box office of $97 million, which is, I feel like there's this threshold of $100 million box office that movies kind of have to surpass, and maybe that's why they sort of looked at this one. A bit more context here. I mean, the Scream series was with, I believe, Miramax, with the Weinstein guys,
old, like,
right?
Dimension films. The
Dimension films, that's
kept
right.
popping up at the beginning. And then this latest one was Paramount.
Yeah, because of the Weinstein fiasco there, and basically selling off, like breaking apart the companies he was involved in. Scream was kind of in limbo in like terms of the rights, and it looks like Paramount and specifically like Blumhouse picked up the rights to do that, and like was able to accelerate the fifth Scream movie that we got today, which had a budget going back down to $24 million. That's like the magic mark for them, it seems. And the box office is about 140. And the box office may or may not mean anything because this came out in January 2022 when some theaters are still closed in North America. And they're still in the middle of the pandemic. The Rotten Tomato score on the latest one is 76%, compared to the previous 60% of Scream 4. So they're all pretty highly regarded. I mean, I think if you look up a lot of horror movies, they're probably pretty low on that Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yeah. Sometimes justifiable, but sometimes I think there's an unfair kind of mark against the horror genre in terms of, I don't know why that is. I think the same thing. Like, there's certain genres, like you look at musicals and horror movies, is very, very drastically different, but like they seem to have like more kind of niche audiences, or like they don't seem to get the same necessarily respect.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I remember seeing, I don't know if it was a movie or a video game or whatnot, but it was a professional reviewer essentially opening up their review of saying, straight off the bat, I do not like horror. And fans are just like, okay, well, why would we want to read this guy's article, this review, if you're not like a horror fan? Because you have to kind of approach these things like from a professional critic angle, as like with some objectivity in a sense.
And like, even if you're not a fan of that specific genre, opening it up with that line is like, that's kind of, that's kind of, it paints the rest of the review in a certain light. It's like, I don't like musicals, for example, but like, I actually quite enjoyed. I finally watched Sweeney Todd recently, or within the past year or so, and I quite enjoyed it. Yeah. So it's like a weird, acknowledging bias is one thing, but to come out and like kind of say like, oh, I hate this genre, and here's my review of this movie, is like, it's a weird critical approach to take, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other elements I made note of is the appearance of the supernatural / hallucination in the latest Scream movie in the form of Billy Loomis, who is
Skeet Ulrich.
Skeet Ulrich shows up and is de-aged for the film, and I thought it was a pretty decent effect. But it was also, I don't remember seeing like a bit of that. I want to keep calling it supernatural because it's like she's
really
seeing it
supernatural. it's established she's like a paranoid schizophrenic or something, right? She's like taking antipsychotic, like the medication she's taking is like literally antipsychotic medication. So it's like an audio visual hallucination that she's seeing. So like they haven't gone supernatural yet.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if they kind of like sliced that into the movie as kind of like a response to how big the paranormal supernatural stuff is in horror movies now. You're like, oh, we need a little bit of that, and we'll have it in this form because they haven't really broached that.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Like that's their kind of like grounded take on a ghost, essentially. That's
exactly.
No, that's.
And it was also nice
neat.
to bring Skeet back and have him show up for a couple scenes. You're like, oh, good, I remember this guy.
I just really wish there was a way to bring back Matthew Lillard, because like my God, that first movie, I was like, we do not deserve Matthew Lillard. That was just an amazing performance. Well, if you've ever seen Matthew Lillard in some of his earlier stuff too, like SLC Punk, amazing work. But like, and then he got into the Scooby Doo era, and then he's done a whole lot of things. I think he was in the Descendants there with George Clooney, where he does like dramatic work too. But like, we do not deserve Matthew Lillard. Whatever you're paying him out there, whatever project he's working on, give him more, double it.
Right. Maybe you find a way to bring him back or in the next film of some sort.
But well, speaking of the actors, I think one of the reasons this series has worked is because of those core actors. I think we touched on it earlier, but just giving props to like David Arquette, who for some reason I had kind of written off. Maybe it's because I haven't seen him a lot in a lot of stuff, but like he always seemed to be like the goofball kind of character.
Yeah.
Kind of funny. And in this one, he was just like, this guy can act. Like,
oh yeah,
what is going on here? Like this, like I was blown away by his portrayal of Dewey. And also David Arquette, I think, gets like one of, if not the best lines in the movie, where they're talking about like, he's with the new group of teens and talking about who could be the killer, and somebody's like, "Oh, you're like a loner who has nothing left to live for," and he's like, it goes on off about this, and then Dewey's like, "Well, you could be the killer because that cut deep."
Yeah,
I was like, the way he delivered it,
that sensitive guy, it was really good.
It was great though, right? And then obviously like Courtney Cox, who's proven her chops from Friends all the way to. I mean, I don't know if you remember in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, she was.
You're going way back in the 90s there.
Way back. Cougar Town, I guess, was another big one.
We could mention Masters of the Universe too, if we're going back that far.
Okay. But she shows up again, gives it her all, and Neve Campbell. I haven't seen her in a whole lot recently. I don't know if she's.
I feel like the last time I saw her was in Skyscraper with The Rock.
Oh, she was in Skyscraper?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't checked that one out yet. I just know like my daughter and wife are going through another rewatch of Grey's Anatomy, and she showed up. It was years ago now, but as one of Derek Shepherd's sisters, which is kind of a neat. It's almost like an interrelated thing because like Patrick Dempsey, who plays McDreamy who played McDreamy / Dr. Shepherd on Grey's Anatomy, was a cop in number 3, and in this one. She mentions like, oh, Mark and the kids, and like Mark was the character. It was Patrick Dempsey's character's name in number 3, implying that she married that cop. So she's in this movie universe. She's married to McDreamy. She's married to Patrick Dempsey in this one, which like it'd be great to have like Patrick Dempsey come back and make a little cameo.
Yeah.
But it's like there was that mention. So like there's all these little callbacks, right? It's so neat. But like Neve Campbell was back. It's like she's always great. Like I really hope that she gets. I don't know if she's actively looking for more work or if she intentionally kind of stepped back from Hollywood. I know that the life is not for everybody, but I hope that she gets more work out of this and get paid for what she's worth. Because like she was right to call that out. Because like this is her series. Like she's kind of one of the definitive, quote unquote final girls, right? Like
without a doubt. I kind of liked how the like Dewey and Gale Weathers relationship mirrors their real life. David Arquette, Courtney Cox. Like I think they met on Scream.
Yeah,
they get married, and it's like they're together throughout the duration of like the first few movies, and now 20 years later they're separated, just like they are separated in real life.
Well, divorced. Yeah, it's kind of nice that they didn't force this divorced couple to be together and make out. It's like that would be kind of awkward. So like. Respectful to the actors and also kind of
the movie is aware on so many different levels there.
Yeah, so like with a movie that's self-aware, you can not get away with, but you can work those kind of real life references and things into the script, right? Another nice thing, one of the characters who gets murdered is named Wes, obviously after Wes Craven, and then there's like at his kind of memorial / party that the teenagers throw, they have this like really nice tribute to Wes Craven where like everyone like shouts like to Wes and they give him a toast. And I think I was reading online, they actually spliced in like the audio from that crowd shouting for Wes actually includes people like Drew Barrymore.
Oh, really?
And like I think Tori Spelling was in there, like all essentially like a bunch of the old cast members, like their audio's nice. All they got together and like maybe not together, but like digitally they all like record to Wes, and like so essentially a lot of the actors from all the old films that's their voices in there, and like there's a nice at the end the title cards for Wes, which is crazy to think about. Reading online and some of these people is like they didn't understand who Wes was. They thought it was like, oh, it's really weird that they were so concerned about this character Wes in the movie, and it's like, yeah, for people who may not be into horror movies, some of these references might get lost. Like it was funny, like some of the trivia that Ghostface would make his victims go through is like when he's like, would you like to play a game? What's your favorite scary movie? And it was like, and he'd ask some questions like, oh, these are all super easy questions, but like maybe it's because I'm coming at it from a different perspective. Like, oh yeah, we're in that we love watching movies and we love movie trivia, so we would know this kind of stuff. Like when they asked about like who's the first actor to play Leatherface, it's like, oh, Gunnar Hansen. It's like, of course, but like not everyone's gonna like maybe that's more obscure piece of movie trivia for a movie that's like 40 or 45 years old, I guess.
It's getting grand, I guess. Masker's getting up there in age, my friend. Yeah.
Also, the main character there, Sam. Also I didn't even realize like the first movie, Billy Loomis as in like Dr. Loomis from Halloween, obviously, but she goes by her mother's name, which is Carpenter, obviously a reference to John Carpenter. So like all these little it's constantly all these tiny references to all these little movies. It's pretty amazing.
The horror world pays a lot of respect to each other in that form. Like every horror movie, you're going to find little bits of that. It's like they're not in competition; they are in this together, and they're having a blast.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like I think all the actors did a good job, except for the only one that kind of didn't work for me. I know it was the writing or something just didn't quite work out. But the main character there, Sam, I can't remember the actor's name, but like her character was just so kind of bland, so generic. Sam Carpenter,
Melissa Barrera.
Yeah, and apparently she was really good in The Heights. I haven't seen it yet, but in this one, her character was just like, it was really uninteresting. Like her younger sister there, was it Tara? I think the name was, played by Jenny Ortega.
Yeah, and I've seen her in a lot of
she was also in X recently. She's becoming like one of the new Scream queens. She was really good. Like I hope she takes over if they're gonna continue this. She should be the lead of the franchise because that older sister was just like, and I don't know, I don't want to be derogatory here, but she was just like, I don't know, the character or the actor was just not a right fit for the role. It was super flat. I didn't connect with her at all. The little sister, like her performance in the movie was just like, like this kid should be taking over. If somebody's gonna be taking over the franchise, it should be that kid then. Yeah, like not like that main girl's like, they should have done more with that character because it was really like.
Well, they definitely have some room for opportunity for a next movie or two. I mean, it's not just one. Like Sidney Prescott, you can follow. There's a couple. There's the two sisters you can follow, and quite a few people do survive.
Kirby's back.
Like and
Kirby should take it over. Hayden Panettiere, done.
You
had me at Hayden.
Was there anything else that did not work, or maybe what really worked for you in this movie when you're watching it? I know you were watching at the end of like a marathon of all these films. Were you gassed out at the end of watching this? Or were you a little tired of Scream? Or you're just like, I'm ready for more?
No, surprisingly, no. Like each movie, there were some kind of retconning and some adding to the mythology, but they did it in such a way. It was small enough where it didn't break everything that came before it. They were like really, really careful with that kind of stuff. So like I was on like I was on a ride with those three main characters, Sydney, Gail, and Dewey. I was actually like surprisingly when they showed up, I was really emotionally invested in those characters by that point. Even though like their survival rate is completely statistically impossible by this point, especially considering the number of stab and bullet wounds they all have.
Well, I like that, like Dewey, I mean, he has nerve damage, he has a limp and everything from all the wounds he's taken. He's been stabbed, I think he said like 9 or 10 times. I'm not sure what else has happened to him in the series, but he's been through the ringer.
At least with Dewey, they kind of acknowledge like there's a physical toll it takes to having been stabbed and injured this many times. Like, oh, yeah, like in the fourth movie, I think there's like a hint of a limp still, but it's like it's probably like it's kind of neat. It's like there's that continuity. It's like, oh, he's probably going through like years of rehab to regain, like in the second movie his hand and his leg are kind of messed up. By the third and fourth movies they're fine, but he's got the limp, so it's like, oh, he's probably gone through surgeries and physical rehabilitation. It's like a nice little touches like that they go through. I was not burned out at all. There's a special mix of horror and kind of cheese that Wes Craven, being from like coming from that generation, like from the 80s and 90s kind of slasher flicks, that he can bring, that was kind of missing a little bit from the new one. It wasn't quite as kind of, you can get the same kind of cheesiness factor.
Yeah.
Where they take things, there's a common thread now, is like, like the idea of like making things grittier, where like a lot of the scenes seem darker, not just darker, like they're shot at night, but it almost feels like there's like a filter put over top of it, or there's a filter applied that makes it like murkier somehow. And like you can see kind of differences in some of the filmmaking. Some of the cheesiness wasn't quite there, but I think overall they did a really good job at kind of taking up that torch from Wes and carrying on Wes Craven's legacy, paying him homage while kind of taking things forward in a little bit different direction. The only other thing I would criticize was, along with that main character, that other group of teens, they were fairly generic. Like they weren't given a whole lot. Like the twins were like, okay, they were not really, I don't know, like from the original movie and some of the other sequels, the characters were like, oh, identifiable. It's like, oh,
yeah,
Jerry O'Connell was in there. And I think in one movie she's actually still wearing his that necklace he gave her with his the frat name on there.
Okay.
But like going back is like, oh, these characters are like, they had something going on, but these characters just seem like, some of the new generation seem kind of bland and kind of underwritten a little bit, or half baked. So maybe in the next movies, I think the twins, even though the football player dude got attacked, I think it's either implied at the end that he survived or shown directly.
He's shown give it a thumbs up from the ambulance. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of missed it. There's so much going on I was trying to keep track of. So like, hopefully in the next movie they're given, if those characters carry forward, they're given a bit more to do and differentiated a bit more. Because I think somebody online had said, it was like, oh, all these characters are Randy now. They're all like
I saw that exact same comment where they're all
Jamie Kennedy's character from the first two movies there, for those of you who don't know. But like he was the one who's explaining all the movie rules constantly, and who's like kind of the goofy sidekick who was like, oh, I'm gonna die but not gonna die. And now like all the characters are explaining the movie rules and everything. It's just like,
With all that being said, like we got to hit a rating on this film. I mean, you don't have to, but I might put you on a spot and ask you to rank all 5 Scream movies. I'm exempt from this because it's been quite a few years since I've seen them, and I don't feel like it would be completely fair. But
yeah, I think I would go probably Scream the original, then Scream 2, then the new Scream, then Scream 4, and then Scream 3 at the bottom. I think that would be kind of my definitive ranking currently.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. And do you have a rating for Scream 5?
I think I was landing somewhere around 3.5. I think the first one I gave like 4.5. Second one was like 4, and this one I think 3.5. I kept wanting, I don't know, I'm on the fence whether to bump it up to like a 4, because it was, the more I talk about it, the more I'm liking it, and I just loved all the homages they paid to their own franchise and to other horror franchises. So it's a really good movie. I'm just still kind of processing to kind of figure out whether I think it was a great movie or not. But definitely, at least for now, at least 3.5. It's not going to drop below that. If anything, it might go up.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? Where did you land on your rating of the new Scream?
I think when I watched it earlier this year, I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed watching it.
Nice.
It felt really fresh and pretty much what I was looking for out of a new Scream film. The subsequent rewatch, I think I put at 3.5 stars. I'm not sure if my finger just slipped on the rating scale or not, but it's like, yeah, why aren't I keeping this at 4 stars? Because I think I went and looked at the very first Scream. I had only given 4 stars, but that's an easy 4.5 stars right there. Like, I thought that was a tremendous movie and like definitely a horror film that I could go back to consistently, regularly. So
like that one, it held up a lot. I might even give that one, go back and give that one the like on that one, because like that first Scream, like I can see myself like putting that into like the yearly rotation.
And it's like, I'm worried that it's kind of that iconic nostalgia. I mean, Scream came out when, I mean, we were in high school. I was going out to the theater to see. I think I might have missed Scream in theaters, but I saw I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was also written by Kevin Williamson and starring a whole bunch of other teen stars at the time that we all were familiar with. And it's like, we had a blast watching that in theaters. I mean, that was like an introduction to horror, like group horror, where everyone in the audience is into it. It brought about a different theater experience, which I imagine seeing something like Scream in the theater would be like, this new one would be kind of similar, where it's just, you have a bit of that history to it now as well. But yeah, no, it's rewatching Scream a couple times over the years. Like, no, it's not nostalgia. This is just a really good film. And especially when you're expanding your horror education and you see, you pick up on more of those throwbacks to other franchises and creators, you can appreciate it even more, especially in the context of like horror just being in a weird place in the 90s and just seeing what it did for the industry. It's like, this movie was firing on all cylinders. And I think this new one was just bang on. It was just really fun. It was just really good.
Yeah, and I think it carries on the tradition. I like in a lot of the movies, the motivations of whoever's donning the ghost face mask at the time their motivations are somehow related to the ongoing kind of social commentary of the relationship between media and society. There's a lot of commentary in there about, it's expressed explicitly in several of the movies about like, there's an ongoing debate usually after a tragedy like a school shooting is like, oh, do horror movies and rock music cause violence? And I think obviously Wes Craven, being at the forefront of the horror genre, was really aware of this, and so I think he was savvy enough to work that into kind of the storyline where the motivations of the killers were like, oh, it was all about this interplay between people's perceptions about how media influences society and vice versa, and like chicken and egg kind of thing. Or is there chicken and egg? Is there a clear answer to life imitating art, imitating life? So I thought for what might be branded as kind of dumb slasher flicks, there's actually a lot going on under the surface.
Well, especially the media commentary as well, which is, I mean, Gail is a reporter, and her motivations were kind of clear in the first one. And as she builds those relationships throughout the series to the point where now they're literally leaving the same house from the first one. And it's like, she has an opportunity to like film a story about this. And she's like, no, we're not going to talk about the killers. I'm not going to write a piece on it. I'm going to write like a tribute to Dewey. And it's just like, it's those people, it's the victims that matter more so. And it's like,
is mirroring how the dialogue has changed around these kind of mass murders, where people are realizing it's like, some of these people are committing these heinous acts in real life to kind of get that recognition, that notoriety, so their legacy lives on. And there's been a pushback, I think, in recent dialogue to be like, no, let's not immortalize the killers. Let's focus on immortalizing the victims and recognizing them, and not give the killer what he wants. So like I love how like Gail's dialogue at the end, like you said, is like represents that ongoing dialogue. It's like, no, like nobody's gonna know these people's names. Like, let them die in obscurity. Like let's let's talk about the victims and like elevate them and memorialize them. And I thought that was really, again, you may have talked me into a 4-star rating here. The more we go into this movie, just so much going for, admittedly, like they present themselves specifically as like, oh, we're the dumb slasher flick.
Yeah.
But the best, dumb slashers have more going on under the surface. But yeah, the Scream, like this is definitely, check out the entire franchise, but like check out the Scream 2022 or Scream 5 or whatever the heck you want to call it. But yeah, it's a great movie, especially in that Halloween time. We're recording this around October 2022, so it's great to kind of add on your list. What's your favorite scary movie, Brian?
I would definitely get murdered immediately because I could not answer a question.
Wrong. The answer is Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, Evil Dead 2. Oh, man.